You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General? Oh.
Hello and welcome to the Bombad Generals. It's Seth. I'm here with Matt. How you doing, Matt?
Oh, I'm doing pretty decently. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, the JJS, Jar Jar Sphinx, has officially 3-0'd round robin for
Yes, we
Invader
have.
League Upper Division. This is our year, I think. Definitely.
Yes. I'm so happy that last round, I was not the weak link. I pulled off the win. Where
I think
did not
you were
pull
only the weak link in one round or something.
No, I
You
was.
were fine.
I lost two. I lost two of them. So it was my first time playing Maul. So
You've been flexing a bit. You played 3 factions in 3 rounds.
I have.
I believe, right? So
yep.
can't
Empire. Yes, I have Empire Shadow Collective and Gar. So
I guess how's that experience been for you? I think for me, when I started playing, when I started Legion, I was all rebels because there were only 2 factions at the time, partly. But definitely expanding, playing different factions, playing different lists. I found even if I didn't stick with them, playing them gives me a deeper insight into how to beat them, because you think, oh man, this is so good, and then you play it and you're like, oh no, maybe it was just good against what I was playing, but when I play it, I have struggles because of X, Y, and then next time I face it, I'll make sure to make those struggles become apparent.
I don't know if I got any insights. I don't know if one game could help
That's fair.
get a lot of insights on that. I know one of the lists I played Double Darks. Shame on me. And
they're legal.
They are legal.
And that's when you won. So see, it makes
that is
losers
when I
into
won.
winners.
It was a very close win. It wasn't as dominating as I thought it was going to be. So Asajj pulled out some cool tricks that I was like, oh, okay, she's actually decent into darks. So
I've been impressed with Asajj so far, for sure.
Yeah. She almost won. Yeah.
She's a dark side user who doesn't really need force choke. Her with burst of speed is really good. Yeah. I think if we start seeing less force users around, that's actually good for her.
I agree.
Because in a force user on force user fight, she's just pretty flimsy, even though she does have Makashi. So I think her stocks are going up.
Yeah.
But to be fair to you, you also almost beat a double dark list, so
I did.
You're not just benefiting from the OP.
Just like how I should have beat Kyle Dornbus at Worlds, I should have beat this. I was playing the game as if I thought the Emperor Palpatine had force push, but he didn't. So I just need to know my opponent, what upgrades my opponent has.
Yeah,
and
it happens.
It does, but it shouldn't happen because I'm a professional.
Professional, you make money. We make good money.
No, I don't.
Doing Legion.
Yes.
This is our livelihood at stake in YBTL.
Oh gosh, I haven't made any money yet, which I'm fine with. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's get into today's episode. We got another 101 episode where we talk about Melee, kind of all the intricate stuff about Melee, the rules, some strategies around that. And that's just what we're going to chat about today. Matt, why don't you start us off? What is Melee? How does it happen? Tell us about it.
For sure. So obviously Melee, the very basis of it is when you are base to base with an enemy unit. So that can be troopers basing troopers. And when that happens, we call that, they are engaged. And sometimes you can have troopers basing vehicles. Or you could even technically have vehicles basing vehicles if you really wanted. The very basic mechanics of how to start a melee, how to get in, you have to start it with your own unit leader or the enemy unit leader. A unit leader in a squad has to move into base contact with any miniature in another squad. So it could be unit leader to some dude cohered out to the side. Assuming, of course, that your squad has a melee weapon. So if you are speeder bikes and you don't have a melee weapon, you cannot start a melee. But most units in the game have a melee weapon. So it's pretty common. So you move into base contact with an enemy, and then you snap together. So you put it so that all your guys are touching, or as many as possible. In a sense, part of this has changed with the CRB, which we'll get into more when we talk about kind of some of the finer points of Melee. But for now, you move guys, they all touch, and then you start punching each other. So when you're in Melee, all you can do, attack-wise, you cannot make ranged attacks out of Melee. People cannot make ranged attacks into Melee, unless there's certain keywords like, area effects, like the yellow area weapons, so basically mines, bombs, that kind of stuff, can go into Melee, and versatile guns can shoot out of Melee. And then, if you want to get out of Melee, the main ways are withdrawing and disengaging, or force pushing people away. So those are kind of the really big basics. I guess another, as far as, frequently asked questions, is that people, sometimes we talked about how you snap miniatures together. So maybe we can start diving here, because maybe this is one of the more tricky parts.
Snapping.
Snapping. Yeah, let's talk about snapping. Boom. But first, so let's say I am a 6-man pike squad. I don't know. Seth has Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker moves in and engages. He touches
Commander
one.
Luke.
Oh dear, yeah. So I'm sitting here, I'm laughing, I'm feeling great about life. But Commander Luke eventually gets into my lines, and I think, no big deal, it's Commander Luke. But anyways, he touches one of the pikes, base to base. So I have 5 other pikes that I have to surround Commander Luke in Melee. Under the old rules, I would have had to fit as many as I could around Luke, which would be all 6 in ideal circumstances. Nowadays, you don't have to place them optimally, but if there is space large enough for a base to fit, where you are touching Luke and obviously not overlapping any other units, then you have to put a trooper there. So if there's a spot, someone's got to go there, but you don't have to create more spots. You don't have to maximize it. So again, if Luke is in the open, then the minimum you would have to put around him is 4 in completely open circumstances, because 3, there's always going to be a spot. So then I could put 4 around him. I could put the other 2 anywhere I want, as long as they're in cohesion. Then, if he kills some guys and creates space, maybe he kills 3 guys and I take away 3 guys who are in base contact with Luke. Now there are spots to put miniatures. Those guys snap in. So they move from their current position and go base to base with Luke. Did I miss anything with the basics of snapping?
I just have a few questions just for clarification.
Okay. Yeah.
Now let's say let's say Luke kills pikes. Boom. I then have to resnap. Now let's say if
I have to resnap. I've got to resnap.
You have to resnap. Now, for instance, let's say if it's my activation and I punch you. Let's say I'm attacking Obi-Wan, and I punch you, and he spends a dodge. He deflects 3 wounds back or something, or a few wounds back, and it creates space. Do I have to resnap on my activation as well?
Oh man. You're asking the tough questions that I have to look in the CRB for defeating miniatures in Melee. Do you have the answer to this nice and handy?
No.
Oh, there we go. We asked an interesting question. So this is a good example of, we don't necessarily know all the rules top of our head, because I was actually just looking at this one, the Melee rules recently, because they're written kind of weird, and I might be making some forum posts about this. There are some weird edge cases that are kind of unclear in the new rules. But space may be created for attacking. It says starting with the attacking player, they must place any friendly miniatures, and then... each player. Yeah, so each player. So you would still technically start with the attacking unit, which is the pikes, and you place your own minis, is what I am reading. So that's the answer to that question. So that was a good brain teaser.
So that is a yes, right?
You kill my pikes, it is because it is my pikes snapping in, I get to control where they go. Which seems like a small benefit, but trust us, people, sometimes it can be important.
Yes. Another question. Can I engage more than one mini? Can I base more than one mini in the unit?
Good question. Yeah, this one comes up a lot. So initially, no. If you are moving Luke in one move, you cannot base two enemies at once, two different units at once. So you cannot base a Pike squad and a Black Sun squad if I've got both. But if you engage the Pike squad, I could bring the Black Suns in later to join that melee, or you could force push them in. Move them into Luke. So those are both perfectly legal, but you cannot melee two things at once. Which
now
yeah, go ahead.
Can I melee two of the Pikes at the same time? If they're in the same squad, Pike minis, or do I have to only melee snap into one?
That
mini?
One, right? So good question. So for that one, you have to move into just one single miniature because the rules do say in moving into melee, page 26, that you move into an enemy miniature rather than multiple enemy miniatures. So that's how that would work.
Alrighty.
So again, that'll have a little bit of an interesting effect on how miniatures get placed. So obviously one of the big things that might impact why you would care about the placement of these miniatures around Commander Luke is if you wanted to leave or block space for other units to enter the melee. So if I am controlling the melee, the cohesion and the snapping, I might want to leave a spot for a unit leader to show up, assuming, again, if there is a spot and I have extra guys, I have to fill them with the Pikes first. But if there's not enough Pikes, let's say I only have, Luke chops and I only have 3 left, I can leave a spot to let the Black Sun move in and punch Luke. Versus maybe Seth, if he is controlling it, because let's say he force pushes a squad into Luke, he gets to control the snapping, and he could make sure that no squad can enter the melee so that Luke can't get punched. I'd say that's the big tactical thing when it comes to snapping in and creating space, is whether you want to have more melee or you don't want to have more melee. Seth might actually want more melee in a sense if he's trying to force push in an activated unit, right? So that kind of brings us into the next section, which is Seth, I'll let you take this one. How do you use melee as a means, especially for Jedi, but for other units as well, to hide or stay safe?
Absolutely. So, other than Force Choke and Din's Amban Rifle, other units cannot attack you while you're in melee. So it's kind of
Neither of those are attacks. Neither of those are attacks anyways.
Okay, deal wounds. Okay.
Yeah.
So for instance, as a Jedi, if I dive, for instance, if you activate a unit and then I dive into that unit and it's already activated, it's already went, I can then tie them up in melee and take a standby or do something to then or even slice if I want. We'll talk about standbys here in a little bit.
They can't get away.
They can't get away. So that other enemy units cannot attack me, which is a great defense mechanism that a lot of melee units use. There's some when we go into standbys, sometimes depending on how the game state, it sometimes is better to take a standby because you don't want to slice all the dudes out and then have a space open for another unit to come in and do melee onto you, especially with the deflect changes. You'll have to be more careful with that because you can't surge to block if you have one of those force users. But if you take a standby, and again, all depending on game state with range 2 and everything, you'll have to really strategize and playing out the ranges. Then you can if someone does an action within range 2, then you can slice. Then, or if you have disengage, you can move out and engage someone else.
I feel like we're getting way.
That's a little too much. A little too much.
So,
but
you are diving with your Jedi. If you dive an unactivated unit of Pikes, right? I can just go activate them, withdraw. Luke's flapping in the breeze in the open.
It's true.
He's
Yes.
going to get shot to bits. If you can dive an unactivated unit of pikes, chop them up, and then force push a unit of Black Suns that have activated, or you just dive the activated Black Sun, they've activated, they cannot withdraw. Luke is safe for that round. Of
true.
course, something to consider is maybe I have Maul, and then I just walk up and force push Luke. So in the Jedi on Jedi battles, it's going to be a KG1. So I'd say that's the advantage of diving an activated unit. But yes, if they have not activated, and sometimes if they have activated, standbys do become very useful.
Yeah.
Because you can't get shot. There's very few ways that you could get a suppression in melee. There is technically one that you left out though, which is sidetrack. Overrun can attack into melee. So if you want a fun, spicy list that I ran at one of the latter elims was Anakin, a bunch of Wookiees, and a bunch of Bombardier Nasps. So you just pile drive your enemy's army, lock everything up in melee, and then just fly over top of them, dropping bombs with precision grenades. But for the most part, there's very few ways to get suppression in melee, especially if you're a character who's immune to mind trick.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you were now we can talk more clearly, I think, about the standbys.
Okay.
Now that we've kind of got the other part out of the way.
Yes.
So yeah, break it down for us. Again, I guess as far as like when you would want to use a standby, what the perks of using a standby in melee are, versus just, hey, I want to chop people up right now.
Yeah. So usually if your opponent hasn't activated, using a standby is pretty helpful because it either forces them, if they withdraw, then you can move back into that melee. Or if they attack you, then you have a way to attack them back if you'd like. Mm-hmm. So you can still get your slicing. You may have to take a hit, but it forces them to, like, their first action has to be an attack. Not like, because if they take an aim or a dodge, boom, you can then slice as well. So that's helpful on that.
Yeah, one of the important things when it comes to withdraws, as we said, that's kind of the main, everyone has access to it, method of leaving a melee. I should say an engagement, because again, that's trooper on trooper. Vehicles, if you're a trooper on vehicle, you are not engaged. You can just walk on out.
True.
And you can get shot, be shot, shoot people, doesn't matter. You and the vehicle cannot shoot you because you are in melee. Sidebar. What were we just talking about otherwise, though?
Standby.
Before that, standbys. Yes. Withdraw specifically we were talking about, and it takes a unit's entire activation to withdraw. So, for one, that means if they have a standby, even though you can do a move on a standby, you can't move, and when you are engaged, you can only withdraw. You can't just move freely. And so you cannot withdraw off of a standby. You cannot be guidanced a withdraw with Yoda or like pull the strings on Palp. It takes your whole activation, which is why Seth is saying either if you are a Jedi and that unit has is activating, either they withdraw and then you can move back into them and then you're safe, or they take an action, which is maybe attack, maybe aim, maybe dodge. Once they've taken one action, they're not withdrawing, so you can chop them into pieces. Yeah. And so that's why if you want to punch a Force user, probably first action you want to do is the attack, and then take a dodge or whatever.
I would also like to throw it in. Also, command cards like No Time for Sorrows or Aggressive Negotiations cannot get you out of melee because they're not during your activation.
Yeah, and they just say you perform anything that says, "Hey, perform a move," is overridden by
you're locked into melee.
Yes, by melee saying, "Hey, if you're engaged, you cannot move."
Correct.
And when you withdraw as well, while we're talking about withdraw, you do not get to use free actions unless you're a creature trooper. So if I have a unit of snow troopers who withdraws, they do not get to shoot their guns with steady.
Correct.
But if I have a Tauntaun who withdraws, they get to pivot with reposition, and they get to shoot their guns, or technically they could withdraw into another melee and punch somebody, but they can perform an attack with Relentless. So that's another important thing to think about with withdraws. Why would you want to activate a Jedi before someone activates? Maybe to get force powers back, maybe to get a dodge. There's different reasons. But again, if I'm sitting there with Maul and Seth takes a standby on Luke, I can probably walk up, force push him into the open, or even worse, if Maul and Luke are engaged and you take a standby, I can just force push you. You will lose that standby because you've performed a move.
Correct.
Right.
It's really 9 times out of 10, I would highly recommend not taking a standby if your opponent has a force user as well.
Force user. What you guys might be gathering is that everything becomes a lot trickier for a force user when there's another force user around who can force push, because then it's a big game of chicken of like who's gonna go last, and that's where activation advantage really comes into play.
It's true.
And again, too, melee is one of the main circumstances where pierce being optional is important, because let's say you're the Black Sun aim and they're about to attack Luke, and then Luke swings his lightsaber, and maybe they block, there's 4 of them, they block 1 out of 4. You can pierce that if you want to, but then there's no more Black Sun, and
to protect you.
And Luke's in the open. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you might want to say, I am not going to pierce it, to leave 1 so that Luke is safe.
Yeah. It's a big thing. Pierce is optional.
Pierce is optional. At range, you're almost always going to use it. In melee, most of the time you're going to use it. Pretty much that one specific circumstance where you're trying to leave somebody alive to protect you in melee is when at least for me, I'm choosing to not use Pierce.
Yes.
I think for the main basics, that's most of it. That's a lot of the stuff. And now we can kind of get, I guess, transition into funky plays. But first, Disengage is what we should talk about. Because I catch, it happens even to me sometimes, even though it's my own pet peeve, a lot of people say disengage when they mean withdraw. And they're two very different things in the game.
They are.
Because withdraw means you do a speed 1 move and you don't get any free actions unless you're a creature trooper. Disengage means if you are only engaged with 1 unit, you can move freely. That's what Operative Luke has. That's what some characters can get on command cards.
Yoda's 1 pip.
Yeah, baby.
I think that's it.
So if Luke...
No, I'm sorry. Duel of the Fates also has it.
Duel of the Fates has it. Grievous has it on his 1 pip.
There's more than... Yes.
There's a few, exactly.
There's
I was
a few.
about to start naming them, and then I was like, I probably can't remember them all. I wouldn't have remembered Yoda, even though it's very
Callus
good.
gets it too.
Oh, does he? Oh, yeah.
And I think, what's it, the 2 pip for the super tack?
Yes, the 2 pip for the super attack. There's a
Gives
lot of
it.
ways you can get disengaged.
Yeah.
The only character who natively has it is Operative Luke.
Oh.
So as long as you are engaged with only 1 unit, you can just move freely, and that's really nice for him.
It is.
And
As long as it's 1 unit.
exactly. And so it kind of means it takes almost 3 units to tie Luke down. Because if it's 2 units, he could force push 1 and then move out of the other. So that's why he's powerful. He's very tough to tie down, and he can kind of do his own thing. And that's a good example of why force push is really good. It has a lot of tricks in the objective game, but if you're a melee-centric character, it allows you to dictate the engagement a lot more. Versus,
true.
I have attacked this unit, I have to keep attacking this unit until they are dead, and then move on to someone else. Because if you're a melee unit and you're in melee, the game's not long enough for you to be withdrawing and try to then go after someone else, most of the time. Right? So that's why we see melee characters like General Grievous or Din Djarin struggle, because they don't have a way to dictate the engagement. Once they're stuck in, they're stuck. And that kind of takes us to the using melee offensively, right? If I if I didn't have force push, or I just have a unit of Wookiees or whatever, Seth could sacrifice a single mini and just move it into melee and say, hey, you can't shoot. You have to spend your activation punching this guy in the face. And he's gonna die anyways. I don't really care about him. Or I've thrown full Rebel Trooper squads, 40-point units. Just said, hey, eat this. Don't come after the units I really care about, right?
Yeah.
So melee is a tactic you can use offensively or defensively, however you look at it, to dictate your opponent's moves. And that's less viable with force push.
While dictating opponent's move, you could also use it for objective play. So for instance, you have a hostage running away, and like you have a bounty hunter or something coming up, like attacking. Most bounty hunters aren't the greatest in melee. So like jumping in melee with them, that ties them up, like, which helps you a ton, especially if you multi-wounds. I remember a game playing, my opponent had some black stuns coming in, and they were about to just demolish me. And so what I did is I just took, I think I had like a phase 2 with like 2 models in it. I just meleeed it. I was like, okay, you can't attack me. You have to, well, you can, but you have to attack this unit.
You have to attack those 2 models versus what you actually want to attack.
So it protected my heavies and my important army, so they could, the important part of the armies, so that they could do something else more towards the game. So it ties up one of his strongest units. There's some things that you could do in the game to help with that, especially those that roll a lot of dice and that are really up close to you. Normally they're just decent in melee.
And usually, you're talking about bounty hunters. I think it's not a coincidence that some of the best bounty hunters that we look at have ways to get out of melee. Boba has whipcord so that he can get out of melee. Cad has gauntlets so that he can, and he has Here I Am, which can do some
funky
tricks.
It's tough to do that while in melee, because like it has to be like within range 1, but outside of range 1 of your opponent.
Well, if I was playing Cad, what I would do is turn 1, put Here I Am in my back line.
It's true.
Move up. If someone engages me at the end of a turn or something, you could, if you want to, teleport back at the start of the next turn. Just some things to think about.
Yeah,
or you could end that turn punching and immobilizing a Jedi, and then just teleport big far away. But some things to think about.
Yeah.
But they usually have ways to get out of melee, which other characters like Bosk, Din, they don't. They're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. But also, objectives is a great way. This isn't exactly objectives, but you can think of melee as well as a way to slow people down, gum people up. Because now instead of double moving, at best you're withdrawing, which is a speed one move.
Yep.
So you might not get close enough. A great example, for a couple reasons, is R2-D2 with Secret Mission. If someone's trying to run R2 down the flank, you don't necessarily need to shoot him. You might be able to just move a unit in of naked rebel troopers and just gum him up, keep engaging him in melee, make it hard for him to cross the battlefield. Because, again, you don't get free actions when you withdraw. So if turn 6 he needs to withdraw to get into scoring, he doesn't have the free action to do Secret Mission. And again, that's actually a card that we forgot about. Disengage
his
on R2's
one pip,
which is why that's an important card for him, because it kind of prevents him getting gummed up.
Yeah, but speaking of like R2, it's also helpful because like if he has a suppression, you then have to attack another unit. If you're in melee with him, he's the only unit you can attack. So that's also a thing to get around his inconspicuous, I believe is a keyword. Same with Han's, I think it's his 2-pip.
Reckless diversion,
Diversion. If you want to attack the unit, just melee them, and then those other tricks don't come into play.
Yeah, you can bypass a lot of defense. Obviously, melee also bypasses cover for just some very basics.
Guardian, they can't guardian a melee.
Yep.
Force barrier, you can't force barrier melee. So just some tricks you can get around.
Yep. Stuff like stormtroopers, they punch harder in melee.
They do.
Yeah, we're kind of all over the place, which is fine. This is like, I'd say how my brain works. I won't speak for Seth.
I think most people can agree that Melee is kind of all over the place. It's not.
Yes, that's true. It's chaotic. We're
It is.
embodying
It is
that
a
well.
little bit. It is a little bit chaotic. If you have like a strictly Melee list, there's a lot of intricate rules that come into play. For instance, like multi-unit scrums. When you have like I've had like 3 to 4 units all in like one little melee, and it just gets so confusing. I don't even know all the rules when it comes to that many.
Yep, you'll pull out the CRB and start looking through. Where it's like this guy's engaged with these guys, but these guys are only engaged with these guys.
Yeah,
it gets crazy.
That's when I pull over
What's
a
a fun
judge
time?
and be like, "Hey, help me out here."
Yeah.
Like,
But sometimes the biggest scrums, here's how we transition back to objectives.
All
They
right.
happen on something like KP or intercept, where end of the
Yes.
game, everyone's rushing for the middle, or even, payload back when people actually ran that competitively. Because if I put a unit on the center KP, Seth could move up and engage my unit. And now they're pretty darn safe. Even if it's just like 2 dudes who I could have easily shot off, and so they don't score, now they're relatively safe in melee. And it's also actually, sneaky enough, very relevant in KP, or it can be, because one rule that we have not mentioned yet, miniatures in melee, if there's in engagement, so trooper on trooper, cannot be displaced.
it's true.
So, if you've got a center KP and you're worried that the opponent's AAT is just going to walk over and displace everybody at the very last activation of the game, and you're just going to lose, well, if you can create a melee on the KP, the AAT can't do that anymore. So if you're the AAT player who is relying on that to win, you don't want to have units actually close to the KP that can get meleeed and create that
Move
situation.
into it early. Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just back off with your own units and say, whatever, the tank's gonna go last.
Yep.
It's, it's a great place to hide, both, for your force users or for units trying to score objectives, and it can mess up plans and keep you from getting shot off of objectives. Body blocking. We haven't really talked about body blocking, but that also comes up in objectives. I guess you don't have to use melee to body block, but if someone's trying to body block, remember, with snapping in melee, you can pull people around a little bit, even if you're not the one controlling the snapping. Because you can make it so that certain units have to move around because they aren't engaged, opening up new space on an objective. So that's something to consider as well. Maybe this would have been a good episode to do with some visuals, because there's a lot of weird stuff. But bear with us, I guess. Just things to keep in mind when you're playing KP or Intercept or Payload, any of those ones. And again, it comes in on everything, because Breakthrough, even Bombing Run, if you're doing it with troopers, those are examples of when you might be engaging to slow people down.
Yep. Now let's talk about some intricate keywords that work and don't work in melee. So for instance, like shields.
Yeah.
Like, do shields work in melee?
That one I do know the answer to, and that is no. Shields do not work in melee. They're only for ranged attacks. I can't remember if I mentioned this at the start, but new players often ask, can I aim and dodge in melee? Yes, 100%.
Yep.
You can use precise in melee. That's fine. It still works. Obviously, you've got some melee-only keywords, like Duelist, which is only for melee. You've got units that are immune to pierce only in melee, like Magna Guards or Imperial Royal Guards. I'm probably thinking we've already touched on, versatile, all of that. But perhaps
You have
we're
like
missing
a
some.
Danger Sense that works in melee.
Danger Sense does. I remember that because I'm a lover of Pathfinders, just visually. I think it's a cool looking unit, and I love Rogue One.
They're cool.
I wish they were better in Legion. Still, they keep not getting love, unfortunately.
Well, they all died, so.
Yeah, they are on theme. They just kind of hang around and die, that's for sure. But they changed that, thankfully, right when Taunts were coming out. Did it mean that they could actually stand up to Taunts even then? No. But that's kind of when the meta went crazy with aggro melee, is when Tauntauns came out back in, ooh boy, summer of 2019. So if you're just reading the reminder text, it will be wrong on Danger Sense. A good reminder to not look at the reminder text, look at the new rules.
We're reminding you to not read the reminders.
Exactly. And one thing that has happened and people have been caught out by in games I've played against them, hostages cannot start a melee.
Correct.
That is a blanket the entire game. Sometimes people get confused of what applies to round one and what applies to the whole game. Hostages for the whole game cannot start a melee if you have a claimed hostage. So, if I am going after a hostage with my Jedi, I cannot force push them into my Jedi. Because the unit leader has to start the melee, they cannot start the melee. It's not Luke, it's not my Jedi starting the melee in that instance, it's the unit that is moving in. Mm-hmm. So, don't double move your force user expecting to force push the hostage and be safe, because you won't be safe. They will not be able to be force pushed into you.
You can still force push them, you just can't push
you can still force push them, but not into melee, so you might just get shot up and die. I would say that is a big watch out, especially because hostage is like one of the few objectives that actually gets taken now as we kind of winnow the field. That might become more and more relevant.
Absolutely.
So be aware of what can and can't start melee. That's, as I say, almost every unit in the game can start a melee, thankfully.
Yes. And there's one more thing I would like to talk about, and that is suppression in melee. In that melee attacks do not add suppression, because ranged attacks only add suppression, unless there's some melee weapons with the keyword suppressive. Like I believe it is the Myrtleizer for the Dark Troopers. Jin's what is
Tonfa, I believe it's called, is that is suppressive. So, and we talked about standbys. If Jin is in melee with you,
not that you're taking Jin.
No, exactly. Again, much like Pathfinders, unlike Pathfinders, she actually can survive a game of Legion.
That's true. That's true.
Which is good and not thematic. But if she punches you, you will lose that standby. And that might be okay with you. That might be really bad. So keep that in mind. I feel like that's a lot. There's one other thing I wanted to mention when we talked about melee. Again, kind of jumping all over the place. We talked about dictating engagements and why force push is powerful. You don't really see like a lot of triple Wookiee lists anymore, or triple Taun, any of that stuff. As much, a little bit here and there. But I think it's an interesting discussion why those lists might have more success than... even though they're melee lists without force push, rather than a force user without force push. And my thoughts on that, it's very different to have just a whole bunch of 100-point Wookiees who, they don't really care necessarily what they're punching. They're just going to keep punching. Like it's a critical mass that they're just going to all come and rip your arms off. Versus if you have one 200-point unit, you need to make sure that one 200-point unit gets to do exactly what they want to do to influence the game.
Yep.
If you're a player, a lot of new players, and I get it, force push is a complicated upgrade. And if you're just like, man, I'm not taking force push because I don't really see the value in it. I don't want to gatekeep, but I would say just take it, and you will learn as you go. There will be situations like it's a critical learning experience to learn in Legion, is using force push. Even if you're not going to be a Jedi player, just to see what it does against you, but especially if you are playing the Jedis.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think that's all we got for Melee 101, even though we probably went a little bit 201, but that's okay.
I was gonna say the exact same comment and you beat me to it. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of 201 in there. It's one of the Melee's just not a simple thing. That's the trick. As you say, it's chaos. It's wild, it's crazy. But that's good. It's a part of the game where you just there's all these sorts of situations that unfortunately you might learn about them when someone pulls the trick on you and you're like, oh right, I guess that is how these rules would interact. And it's just a thing that I think more than a lot of other parts of the game, you just learn through experience all the little nooks and crannies of how melee and especially engagement can impact a game and can be useful beyond just I want to go punch you.
Yeah. Yes. I feel like if you learn a lot of the master, like you don't even have to master it. If you become like an advanced player for like Melee and just learn all the intricate rules, you can pull off some pretty cool objective plays in the game that I think would surprise your opponents.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then you'll feel really cool and they'll curse your name.
You may become the new bad boy of Legion. Who knows?
Oh no, don't take the title away from me. Yeah.
Oh man.
Alrighty.
I will let you keep the title of bad boy of Legion if you play Yoda arcs at LSO.
What if I played Anakin Wookiee's triple NAS Bombardiers at LSO?
You would still have that title then.
Nice. Okay.
Please.
Okay.
Good luck traveling with those though.
That is the problem with the Fluttercraft. They are very difficult to travel with.
Yes.
Almost, I guess this is kind of tangentially related to Melee. It's probably good that everything we have with Overrun currently is kind of underpowered.
It's good.
Because it would be very problematic. We talked about how Melee ignores a lot of stuff. Overrun ignores a lot of stuff as well in weird ways. And maybe it would be fine, but I think if those units were actually like really, really good and effective, it would be problematic. So I think it's good that the butt gunner got decreased and not the grenade guy, the bombardier. I initially thought it was the bombardier and I was excited, but unfortunately not.
Yeah.
We could probably... No. I was going to say, Overrun is also such a complicated keyword. We could probably do a whole episode on Overrun.
Overrun
but I think
101.
Oh, everyone would lose their minds trying to... Yeah, just listening to that.
It did win a tournament, last year? I believe it...
like the Fury Road, the Evan Boris list. It got second.
Okay, I'm sorry, second. It was
second to Kyle, which is almost like winning.
Yeah, it was a Nova Open. Like
yeah, it was Nova. That's pretty good. That's
pretty good. So
yeah.
Oh man. Hopefully we'll see some more Wookiee NASP whenever the promised Kashyyyk Battle Force comes out.
Has that been promised?
Well, when they were first initially talking about Battle Forces, a lot of from the first initial thing was supposed to come with the Kashyyyk wave.
Okay.
Didn't happen.
We'll see. We can always hope. But we're way off the rails now. Yeah. So thank you everyone for putting up with this.
Hey, let's just Gungan Battle Force. Let's go.
Go.
If
we have a Gungan Battle Force, then that would allow us to stay Gungan.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.